Chapter 3 Wounds. Tsukumojiku was missing, presumed dead, and it seemed my days of adventure had ended. I went to school, I barely spoke to anyone but Mum, and had my nose in a book all day long, at school or at home. Even though I'd had no friends as a child and rarely went outside, I'd not been much of a reader, but being friends with Tsukumojiku and seeing how he used the information he'd learned to help him solve cases and increase the flexibility of his thought processes made me intolerant of my own ignorance. But I still hated studying and never really took school seriously, so I couldn't really keep up with the other students. So I decided to start small with novels. Mother had quite a collection of English novels overflowing our bookshelves. Since I was a detective, I started with Sherlock Holmes, but after visiting the scene of real crimes with Tsukumojiku, it just seemed so tame and stiff, so I gave up. I then tried Charles Dickens, Oscar Wilde, and Emily Bronte, but it was H.G. Wells whom I fell in love with. The Time Machine, The Island of Dr. Moreau, War of the Worlds, The Invisible Man, all science fantasy, all terrific. They even made me like science. And when Mum saw me reading a book on science, she suggested we hire a tutor. She'd never really been one for forced study or early bedtimes, but she had a keen eye to when I might be open to such a suggestion, so I didn't feel moved to turn her down. I had an idea for who might be a good tutor, a girl Tsukumojiku and I had met on our last case, the one who'd helped us finally catch Javier Cortez. Her name was Penelope de la Rosa. She had a pathological fear of clowns, so when Javier had haunted her dreams disguised as a clown and tried to convince her to commit a locked room murder, the blow to her system had been so extreme she'd quit school and never left the house. She was quite the beauty, and I thought maybe sharing some stories of good times with Tsukumojiku might help cheer her up a bit. But when I went to see her, things didn't go so well. She barely gave me the time of day. "Sorry, but seeing you makes me remember the clown in my dreams, and I get scared." Whoops. Clearly, I'd been tactless. Now that she mentioned it, while Javier had been after her, Penelope had been in a state of panic and was perpetually shivering, even in broad daylight. Oh. Sorry to just drop in like this then. I didn't mean to upset you, I said, and turned to leave. I'm sorry too, George, she said from the other side of the door she refused to open. You came all this way. I can't stop myself thinking about the clown, but I was glad to see you. And honestly, it's something of a relief to talk to someone like this. I was very glad to hear it. Also, even though nearly everyone I'd met solving cases was Spanish, they all pronounced my name George. That was Tsukumojiku's parting gift. That thought made me sad, but there was a warmth to that sadness. I went home. But the next evening Penelope came to see me, looking very upset. "George!" she yelled from outside. Surprised I got out of bed, I glanced at the clock. It was 1:30 a.m. For a moment I wondered if I'd dreamt it, but then she yelled again, "George Joestar!" I cracked open the curtains and Penelope was standing outside the front door. "What is it, Penelope?" "You've got to help. You've got to do something." "Do something about what?" "Look, calm down." "How can I? He's back. Javier Cortez is back. It's all your fault. Nothing happened until yesterday." "Javier? This made no sense. The islanders killed him and dumped his body into the sea." "Okay, wait a second. I'll be right out." I left the window, went downstairs and burst out the front door. Penelope was shivering in a sleeveless dress and a pair of sandals. She did not appear to be harmed, just terrified. She collapsed into my arms as I approached. Her body was horrifyingly cold to touch. "Ah!" she wailed, clinging to me. "I'm so scared. Javier Cortez is still after me." "He isn't," I said. "He's dead. You saw the body. They'd beaten him with stones and farm implements until his skull split open. There's no way he could have survived. It was just a dream. Don't worry. He no longer exists." Penelope pulled away and glared at me. "No, it wasn't a dream. It really happened. He came to my house." "He couldn't have," I said, growing melancholy. Perhaps Penelope had genuinely gone crazy. Frustrated, Penelope yelled through her tears, "It's true! And he ran ahead of me on the way here, jumped out at me." "Jumped out at her? What do you mean? I'll hear you out. Just calm down and start from the beginning." "Look, after you came to visit yesterday, I went back to my room. The door was locked from the inside, and so are the windows. I couldn't get in. It was a locked room. I thought there had to be someone in there at first. I was scared, so I went to the kitchen, where my mother was, but the kitchen door slammed shut right in front of me. It was locked from the inside. I got scared and called out, and then she started screaming, 'There's somebody in here!' Now both of us are in a panic and trying to open the door, but it won't open. Cortez wanted me to kill my mother, remember? She knew that, so she thought it was me again and yelled, 'Don't do it, Penny, stop. Don't kill me. I would never do that. Cortez is dead, and I'm back to normal.' I was so worried about her. I tried to kick the door down, like how you and Tsukumojiku used to get in the locked rooms, but it wouldn't open." In emergencies, Tsukumojiku and I would kick open doors. If events were still in progress, we'd attempt to intervene, but normally we'd try to preserve the scene and look for a key or some other way in. Or else, make another way in. People making locked rooms often took a broken door down into account and would often try and use that to hide evidence. We didn't want to give them the satisfaction. My kick didn't do a damn thing to that door, so I started throwing myself into it, over and over. At last, it broke, and I came rushing in just in time to see a clown in the corner before it disappeared. I froze to my spot. I couldn't move. Mother was hiding behind the sofa, hysterical. At last, she came out and came over to me. But she blames me for everything. She thought I was trying to kill her again. She's sure that I hate her now. Penelope's parents had divorced 4 years ago, and Penelope's mother had full custody. Penelope blamed her for taking away her father. Their relationship had been strained to begin with, and when Penelope started dating a man named Edvard, a thug who beat her and sold anything she owned of value, Isabella, her mother, tried to convince her to break up with him. Edvard played the two of them off against each other, leaving Penelope alone in the world. He threatened to ruin Penelope permanently if Isabella interfered. In the end, Isabella gave up on her daughter. Then the clown started showing up in Penelope's dreams, face covered in white, with bright circles round his eyes and mouth, a huge grin, a cheery manner, lots of big gestures, and calls to the crowd. Penelope found his ridiculous nature deeply frightening. She couldn't move, her body covered in a cold sweat, her heart beating so fast it seemed like it was beating right into her brain. She couldn't even look away, and her breathing grew so shallow she was barely conscious enough to think. Occasionally her eyes even rolled back in her head, and she fainted, while still asleep and dreaming. The only person she could talk to about this fear had been Isabella. She's the only one I can trust. I finally realized that, but no matter how many times I tell her, she... Penelope started crying again. I have no idea what to do when girls cry. I just stood there awkwardly and waited for her to stop. So, she continued, still crying. I went over to the window where the clown was, very slowly, ready to run, and I found this. She held out a doll about the size of her palm. It had no clothes and a shapeless face with eyes and a wide open mouth stitched on. The eyes were white circles with no pupils, and there was blood streaming out of the mouth down its chin. There was a hangman's noose tied around its neck. Is it dead? It's supposed to be me, I'm sure. It's a warning. I'm going to die. Someone's going to murder me soon. That won't happen, I said, but I had no basis for this, and Penelope knew that. Still, I thought, this was all happening because I thoughtlessly went to see her. Nothing like this had happened before today. Why don't you come in? I said. I led her up on the porch and tried to open the door. It was locked from the inside. Mum? Why would she shut us out? George! Her voice came from inside. Run! What? Open the door, Mum! Suddenly terrified, I began rattling the knob, but the door wouldn't budge. Listen to me, George. You have to run. Mum, open this door. What's going on? There's a clown in here. A clown? Huh? Penelope squeaked. She backed away, almost falling down the 2 steps up to the porch. Oh, George. Sorry. I think I brought it with me. This made no sense. Javier Cortez was dead. I didn't believe in ghosts, which meant someone living must be doing this. I'd learnt that much after 4 years as Tsukumojiku's friend. There were no ghosts. There was no magic. Curses only worked on the emotions of those that believed in them. The Chinese were not wizards, and there were no drugs or poisons with special properties that favored criminals. Everything had meaning. Everything could be explained logically. The clown on the other side of this door could be explained too. Mysterious clowns only existed in dreams. I put my back into it and kicked the door down. Crash! I'd kicked a lot of doors down working with Tsukumojiku, but this was definitely my best ever attempt. The door broke free of the lock, flew inwards, and did a full 180, slamming against the inside wall. Mum! I yelled, bursting in. Then I saw it. A clown floating in the air, and my mum facing it down. The clown did exist. Ah! Penelope screeched behind me. Okay, so the clown was real. Penelope could see it too. A fat little white clown, white hair, white makeup, puffy white clothes. Penelope, wait outside! I yelled, and grabbed a nearby chair with one hand. Strike before you think, I told myself. I swung the chair through the air and hit the clown with it. Rah! Shoo! The chair zipped through the air. The clown vanished. No, it broke into tiny pieces. What the? The chair hit the floor. This wasn't a ghost. I'd never seen a ghost, but this clown didn't vanish like mist or smoke. It shattered into tiny pieces. They were hard to make out, but they were still in the air in front of me. Mum, you get out of here, I said. Calm down, George, Mum said behind me. I don't think the clown means us any harm. What makes you say that? I was quite surprised when it appeared and all the doors and windows slammed shut, but when that girl outside, Penelope, appeared, I understood. I don't know how, but I believe Penelope is making that clown. She's making it to protect herself. Huh? George? Are you okay? Penelope asked. I turned around, and Penelope had come back up the steps onto the porch and was looking in the door. Penelope, don't come in, I meant to say, but suddenly the door slammed shut, and the floating clown manifested in the shadows behind it. Penelope's shriek and my yelp of surprise overlapped. The clown ignored us both, dragged a heavy side table over to the door, and wedged it under the doorknob, locking us in. We were in a locked room. George, run! Penelope screamed. I'm so sorry. I brought him here. But the clown never looked at me. It just stared at the door, at Penelope on the other side of it. Chair in hand, I moved slowly closer. The clown didn't turn around. I studied it closely. There were cracks on the surface of it here and there, and I could see inside. There was nothing in there. It was all surface. A hollow clown. I moved even closer. The cracks in the clown had frayed edges. I put my face right next to it and could see the threads. This clown was woven out of thread. What thread? I found a single thread dangling down from the clown's hip. I followed it with my eyes. It ran along the floor and through the gap under the front door. Penelope, step back. Okay. I'm sorry." She was crying again. I listened for her footsteps on the stairs, then moved the side table and opened the door. "Look out, George! Behind you!" Penelope screamed. She must have seen the clown behind me, so I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door. "Oh, good. Are you okay, George? Oh, come over here. There was a clown right behind you." The white thread ran across the porch, down the steps, and over to Penelope. "Wait, George, your mother. She's still in there with the clown. We have to save her." Penelope bravely started up the stairs again, so I put my arms around her. She was the one who needed saving. What are you doing, George?" she said, struggling. The clown." My hands were resting on her shoulders, and I could tell her sleeveless dress was now held on by a single string over each shoulder. In the night air, her shoulders were very cold. "My mum's fine," I said. Penelope stopped struggling. She was still scared and confused, but she was standing still now. My arms were around her, pulling her to me, fighting the force of her fear. It had happened again, I thought. Just like Javier Cortez's power over dreams and Antonio Torres's skin shedding, constant fear and suffering had given her strange powers. I remembered how the trick Javier Cortez had wanted Penelope to use had involved a thread running under the door to turn the key. A very simple trick. It would have bored Tsukamotoku to tears, but the fear it had given Penelope was so great it had led to this mysterious power. I cursed the fear itself silently, holding her close. Eventually the thread from Penelope's dress snapped. A doll in a noose dropped behind the door, and Mum brought it out. I took it, showed it to Penelope, and unravelled it before her eyes. There was a loose thread coming out of the doll's hip, and one tug on that was all it took. The doll came apart that easily. "I know this is hard to believe, but you made all of this, Penelope. This clown, the locked room, this door. You are much too scared of the clown that wanted you to commit a locked room murder. You couldn't take the constant fear, and it gave you a strange power, the ability to make locked rooms. But since you don't want to do that, you make the clown do it. And because you don't want to kill anyone, you kill this doll instead. And it all gets shut inside a locked room." Penelope didn't believe me, of course. She couldn't see inside the physical locked room, and it was harder for her to look into the depths of her own heart. I just had to hope she'd get used to it in time. But wherever Penelope went, no matter what door she drew near, her fear slammed it shut, made a locked room, a clown appeared inside, and a doll was hung. And that just fueled her fear. I got used to it quickly enough. I had never been afraid of clowns or locked rooms. I explained it to Isabella and had her observe the power in action, but she remained terrified and convinced Penelope had been possessed by the devil. So I talked it over with Mum, and we decided to have Penelope come live with us. Our house was probably the largest on La Palma, with plenty of rooms. After all, Mum was a majority stockholder in a successful English company called the Speedwagon Company, so we didn't lack for money. And she ran a trading company of her own with ships and warehouses in every port in the Canary Islands. She hired Penelope to work in the La Palma office and also to be my tutor. Just standing in front of a door caused it to slam shut and form a locked room, leaving Penelope quaking in the shadow of the clown, but I went with her to work and walked with her around the house, and in time, locked rooms stopped showing up, at least at the office and our house. Frankly, I was somewhat disappointed. I mean, just standing in front of a door made Penelope's clothes unravel? La Palma was hot all year, and nobody wore that many clothes to begin with. Penelope wore sundresses and maybe a light shawl over her shoulders, and that's it. Having that unravel, the surface area rapidly shrinking, oh my. Naturally, I said nothing, pretending to be focused on the problem and not to have noticed anything. But, boys, the girls see right through this. She picked up on my furtive glances and rapidly covered herself with pillows or nearby bedsheets. "I still can't believe it, but that grin on your face makes me think it has to be true. Was I grinning? Crap, I mean, sorry, Penelope, you're really scaring me here. I was all flustered every time, but Penelope was never really all that mad at me. Would I ever be a proper gentleman? Apparently not. One day in February, 6 months after Penelope moved into the Joestar residence, and a while after she'd been able to go to work on her own, she asked me to go with her again. Sorry, George. Just for today, I promise. Yesterday, I just got this idea in my head that someone was following me. I'm scared to go on my own. Usually, my job was to say, "Look, you made this locked room, Penelope," or else, "The clown is made of thread, and it'll turn into a doll in a few minutes, so there's no need to be frightened." But this sounded more like actual bodyguard work. I was getting nervous already. I mean, when I was working with Tsukumojiku, we used to burst in on murder scenes and chase killers around and catch them, but most of the work was done by Tsukumojiku and the police, while I hovered nearby shrieking. I didn't ever really fight at all, and I still had no real confidence in my left hook. The only thing I'd really gained from those experiences was courage? Or so I'd like to say, but apparently I hadn't even managed that. Because when I tried to stand up from the breakfast table and say I'd go to work with her, my legs were shaking so much I couldn't walk straight and stumbled into the table. All the dishes rattled. Damn, that was a little too frightened. I even surprised myself. "Oh, George, sorry. Are you okay? You don't have to come." Penelope smiled bravely. "I'll be fine." Ugh, she totally knew I was scared. But even though I was embarrassed, part of me was super relieved she said that, and looking forward to getting back to sipping my coffee. Pathetic. I hadn't improved one iota since grade school. But before I could say anything, Mum stepped in. "No, George, you have to go with Penelope." Well, at least I maintained my dignity. Maybe. But in the sense that both of them knew exactly what I was thinking, probably not at all. I suddenly had a very bad feeling about the day. But I left the house with Penelope. She thoughtfully chose to be super chatty to keep my mind off things, but my head was full of all the times Antonio's gang had come after me, and it felt like a dark cloud was hovering over my head that I was sure it would bring bad luck. Of course, Antonio Torres was dead, and his primary cohort, Julio, had long since lost interest, so neither of them showed up. But on the way to the office, there was a road that cut through the middle of an open field, and waiting for us was Penelope's ex, the bad Edvard Noriega. I froze to the spot, my mind blank. Penelope glared at him. "Hey, Penny. Long time no see. What? What do you want?" "I just wanted to see how you were getting on." "I don't want to see your face ever again." "Hey, don't say that. I'm dying here." "You heard I was working for the Joestars, right? I'm not lending you money, and no matter what trouble you're in, you'll get no help from me." "That's not it. I got no money, true, but I don't need that. I saw something strange." Strange? That word finally snapped me out of it. Edvard was nothing like he'd been when Tsukumojiku and I last spoke with him. Where once he'd been an alpha male and treated Penelope like his property, now Edvard was genuinely terrified, his voice shaking, his face pale. He was downright begging for Penelope's help. "Come on, George, leave him be. He's a great actor, always was good at making people pity him," Penelope snapped. Really? Acting? This was a performance. "No, I'm serious. Listen, please. I saw this creepy guy with wings. Shut up and go away." I was so scared. It was too dark to see his face, but he's after me. "I don't care. Take care of it yourself." I just know he's gonna kill me, Penny. Have a heart. You gotta listen. He's like a moth in the night, tapping softly on the wall. Shut up, shut up, shut up! You never once listened to a word I said about the clown. It serves you right. I couldn't be sorrier about that, honest. It was all my fault, so please just stop a second. Don't go digging up the past. Listen, 2 nights ago, I went out to see this girl I've been seeing. Prunella. I don't want to hear about it. You gotta listen. I don't love her anything like as much as I loved you. I swear. I don't care. You'd better stop or... Penelope was so angry now she'd stopped walking. And how could she not be? When the case with Javier Cortez broke, Edvard had split without even saying goodbye. Even after Penelope had shut herself in, Isabella said she'd spent a while waiting for him to come back. And now he shows up, talking about his new girlfriend, even though he'd never bothered breaking up with his old one. The worst thing a man could do, let alone an ex. So, I was lying in bed with Prunella when I suddenly woke up. Did you not hear me say stop? I don't want to hear it! Penelope roared. I knew how she felt, but her anger was so explosive it scared me. Come on now, just ignore him. Let's go, I said, trying to calm her down and pull her away. Then I saw her face. There were veins bulging on her forehead. Her lips were curled back, baring her teeth. She looked downright mad. This wasn't going to work. Penelope was beyond the help of words, but Edvard was too wrapped up in his own affairs to notice. He was standing at the base of the bed, black as the devil, but so quiet he hardly seemed real. Something red trickled down from Penelope's nose, blood. She was so furious there was blood running down her chin. If you don't stop talking, I'll kill you, she said, and I was too scared to try and stop her. While I dithered, there was a burst of wind around me. Had the wind changed? No. There was a rumbling below me, and the sound was moving, coming closer. What the? I looked around half expecting to see all the dogs and cats on the island rushing towards me, but nope. What was actually happening was far more terrifying. The ground itself was moving. Screech! It swirled, gathering itself around us. A mound of earth raced by, like a carnivore hell-bent on devouring the crops. It passed behind me, heading for Edvard. I knew he wasn't a thief for nothing. Thieves don't watch people when they sleep. They don't wear clothes that make them look like they got wings. I'm gonna kill you, Edvard. Stop it now, or will you die? Both of them kept talking, oblivious to the other. Penelope's nosebleed had dyed her chest red, and Edvard's eyes were focused on nothing. The very fact that he hadn't noticed what was going on was possibly the most frightening part of all this. Look! I opened my mouth to yell, but the dirt and grass around him heaved, and 4 walls shot up around him. But Edvard didn't stop mumbling. I was too scared to get up. And then he spoke. Close your eyes, lie down, and think about tomorrow, he said. He was about to be swallowed in a 5-meter wide square of dirt. I said stop, Penelope hissed, another squirt of blood shooting out of her nose. I took one look at her and knew this was all her doing. I don't know what he meant, but I knew one thing. This black-winged man was gonna do something awful to me. Just before the earth walls swallowed Edvard completely, I saw a black figure standing behind him. It had a round nose and a hat and big hair. A clown. The walls closed together on top, closing Edvard in with the dirt clown. The locked room was complete. If you'd stopped, you would have lived, Penelope raged. Penelope had finally learned to make a locked room and the evil clown inside without using her clothes. And part of me was actually impressed. Penelope's wound had given her concrete power, and she turned it into a weapon. And given the source of her powers, I immediately decided to call it a capital W wound. Injury was too coarse, and trauma sounded too medical, and the implication that it was mental suffering was too strong. This wound was both physical and emotional, I decided, and it also grew over time. But this was no time to go naming things. Was I an idiot? I had time to be weirdly impressed later. No, Penelope, stop! I said, forcing myself to speak. Don't kill him! Penelope didn't even look at me. "It's not me." Of course not. It was the clown. "Edvard! Run!" I yelled, dashing towards the locked room. There was no door or window, just the walls, grass woven tightly together, dirt plugging up the cracks. I tried yanking on the grass, but the holes filled quickly with more grass and dirt. The walls were alive. "Ha!" Edvard screamed inside. Had the clown got its noose on him? Fundamentally, the point of a locked room murder was to make a murder look like a suicide. But if Edvard died like this, and someone found him, would the police think he built a room of dirt and grass and hung himself inside? I don't know. But without evidence showing how the locked room was built, without proof it was murder, would the police have any other choice but to rule it as suicide? If so, Penelope's locked room murder would be a success. But I wouldn't let that happen. I wouldn't let Penelope murder anyone. I ripped into the grass and dirt walls, forcing a hole to open. I had to work faster than the automatic recovery, and I got the hole large enough to check on Edvard. I couldn't see most of him, but his feet were dangling in the air, kicking. He was hanging. "Stop, Penelope! Don't make a locked room! Break this locked room down!" I shouted, making the hole even wider, and before the grass and dirt could fill it in, I dove in. "No, don't, George! Come out of there!" Before Penelope's cry finished, the wall closed behind me, muffling her voice. I turned around just in time to see the hole close completely. Edvard was dangling from the ceiling, a rope of grass around his neck. Behind him, an earthen clown dangled upside down from the ceiling. Why had I jumped in here? "Ah!" I yelled. There was a snap as the grass rope dropped down from the ceiling and pulled tight around my neck. It yanked me into the air, hard. The grass dug into my throat, breaking the skin, but I barely noticed. The weight of my body nearly made me black out instantly. Luckily, my neck didn't break, but the noose was choking off my windpipe and jugulars, cutting off the flow of air to my brain. With my blood not moving, my entire body gasped for oxygen. The pain was so great I tried desperately to loosen or break the noose, but it wouldn't budge. Instead, more tendrils slithered down, weaving themselves into the noose, making it stronger. I was starting to panic. The dirt clown moved its face next to mine, watching me die. Now I was really panicking, but I couldn't. Not now. My legs couldn't reach the ground, and this clown was going to make sure I died. I wasn't getting out of this by brute forcing my way free. Think. I had to think. How could I break the locked room? Penelope. Could Penelope save me? No, she'd made the locked room. Penelope had no idea what was happening inside it. Anything that happened would be the clown's fault, in her mind. Penelope was even less aware that she was doing all this than the clown, staring emotionlessly into my eyes. After Edvard and I were dead, she'd cry a while, tell everyone a clown killed us in some mysterious locked room, and then forget all about it the moment the funerals were over. I couldn't rely on her at all. I had to think of a way to break the locked room myself. And without doors or windows, I couldn't just kick it down. I couldn't use brute force. Was it possible? Maybe it was. If I could break the idea of a locked room, somehow. The point of a locked room was to make murder look like suicide. If I could provide evidence that this was murder, if I could leave that behind somehow so that the police would have to investigate further, then that would destroy the locked room's function. I yelled, not because of this idea, but because the pancakes and coffee I'd had for breakfast had come up my throat and were dripping back down into my windpipe. Shit, my breakfast was going to kill me before this noose did. I had to hurry, but carefully. I couldn't screw this up. I pulled my knife out of my back pocket. It was a pocket knife mostly designed for opening wine. The blade was 3 centimeters long. I kept it around for self-defense because I was pathetic, but today I was very grateful to have it. I pulled my shirt up and stabbed the knife into my bare belly. I yelled, gargling the vomit in my windpipe. My vision was getting blurry. I could barely see. I knew the clown was still there, though. There was a shrill ringing in my eyes and I was about to pass out entirely, but I could not panic. I had to write. Feeling my way across my belly with the knife, I wrote a message that the clown would have to read. M-U-R-D-E-R. Murder! Nice and simple. I barely made it. While I was writing the final R, I lost consciousness, and the world went black before my eyes. I saw a tiny light in the darkness, and wondered if that was the entrance to the afterlife. It seemed so warm. Should I jump on in? No, I wasn't done with this world yet. But... Just as I was starting to feel rather rapturous, my ass hit the ground, the ceiling opened, sunlight streamed in, and I threw up more than I've ever thrown up before. Once my stomach and lungs and pipes were totally clear, I felt so happy, I wondered if I could split this joy with Penelope, who was clutching me and crying, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Edvard was unconscious, but alive. I was relieved to see it. My belly throbbed, but it would heal in time. Or so I thought, but apparently I dug a little too deep, and the word murder would remain upside down on my belly forever. When the doctor told me this, I gaped at him, and Penelope started crying again, and a familiar voice from the hospital room door yelled, "George, who did that to you?" And I turned to look and saw Lisa standing there, a little taller, her hair much longer, and even more beautiful. I hid my bare belly, and Penelope wiped her eyes and stopped crying. "Are they still bullying you?" "Murder? Is that a threat? George, what have you got yourself mixed up in?" Lisa was jumping to conclusions. 4 years had done wonders for her, but the gulf between her insides and outs was already getting on my nerves. No, I did this myself." "Don't lie to me. Nobody would ever do that to themselves." "Look, I had a good reason." "Then explain it to me this instant." "Oh, shut up. I don't have to explain everything I do to you," I said, dismissively. Lisa clamped her mouth shut, her bottom lip quivering, tears in her eyes. "Ah, come on." Sorry," Penelope said, standing up. "It's all my fault." "Forget it, Penelope. It doesn't matter now." "But, oh, this is the Penelope Mama Irina mentioned," Lisa said, glaring at us. "I suppose I should introduce myself. I'm Lisa, right? George and Irina told me about you." "Don't you call me Lisa. My name is Elizabeth Straits, senorita." I cringed. Fireworks were flying between them. Penelope looked ready to make a locked room around Lisa and summon that clown. I had to do something, so I forced myself to speak. "What brings you here, Lisa? You coming home again with us? Mum will be glad to see you, or did you already talk to her? Did you go see her first? I suppose you wouldn't know to come here otherwise. We kept your room the way you left it, so..." "Finding you here was a coincidence, George," Lisa interrupted. "I had a question for the doctor here and saw you'd been hurt. I was a little surprised, that's all." Her tone had softened to my relief. "A question for me," the doctor said. "Have you had patients coming here claiming to have seen a man with wings, or a man like a moth?" So much for my relief. I had just heard that exact story from Edvard Noriega, a creepy guy with wings, he'd said. Penelope looked as stunned as I was. "Yeah," the doctor said. "We've had a lot of patients wondering if they were having a nervous breakdown." Lisa nodded as if she'd expected that answer. "I checked with the police as well. They have quite a collection of reports of this man, and the citizens have formed a watch to search for him." "Huh? Really?" I had no idea. I spent most of my time in the house reading, so I was out of touch with the goings-on around town. "At first I thought it was a trick of the light or an illusion," the doctor said. "But more and more people came, so I was forced to conclude that it's some sort of mass hysteria, a delusion everyone believes." He paused and sighed deeply. Until he came to me last night. This man with black wings, he really exists. It's no delusion. I don't know if he's of this world or not, but he is real. The delusion even reached the doctor. Should he still be examining people? I looked at Lisa, concerned. Do you remember what happened 5 years ago, George? When Straits and the others came and told everyone not to leave their houses? Of course I remembered. The Antonio Torres case. A chill ran down my spine. Is that happening again? Yes. This time we will be thorough. I was scared now. He spoke to me, the doctor said, his eyes as glazed over as Edvard's had been. Close your eyes, lie down, and think about tomorrow, he said. The exact same line, word for word. Even scarier. Don't do as he says, doctor, Lisa said. Lock yourself in your house tonight, and if anything frightens you, retreat even farther inside. The way she put it was the scariest. What happened 5 years ago? Penelope asked me. I remember locking myself in, but... I couldn't begin to answer. The three of us walked home in silence to find Straits and Mum sipping tea in the parlour. The mood was hardly pleasant. In fact, it was so tense I wanted to cry. There was no escape anywhere. Everything on the island was terrifying. After greeting them, Lisa said, Mama Irina, I think it's time George knew the truth about what happened to his father. Mum put her teacup on the table. Yes, I suppose you're ready to hear the story, even if it is a frightening one. No, I definitely wasn't. But I couldn't say that, or even shake my head. I was already too scared to move. Should I wait in my room? Penelope asked. Mum shook her head. You should stay too. This story concerns not just the Joestar family, but all mankind. And then she told the story. Dio means God in Italian, and in Spanish it's close enough, Dios. I had known the name Dio as the name of a troubled uncle of no blood relation. My father uncovered a plot of Dio's to slowly poison my grandfather, George, and when the police came to arrest him, he'd resisted, and the Joestar mansion burnt to the ground. That much was as I'd heard it, but the ending was different. Uncle Dio did not die. Mum's story began with that correction. Dio Brando. He'd kept his father's name even after being adopted by the Joestars. Had stabbed my grandfather right in front of Jonathan and the police. Then put on some stone mask that had been found in an Aztec ruin in Mexico. He wiped George Joestar's blood across the surface of it, and long needles shot out, stabbing him in the head. What should have killed him instead turned him into a vampire. He destroyed the police with ferocious strength and fought with my father. In the end, both survived the fire with substantial injuries. My father met a man named Will A. Zeppeli, who taught him a secret method of breathing based on ripples, called Hamon breathing. It imbued my father with the power of the sun. Like any zombie or vampire, the sun was Dio's greatest weakness. Armed with this Hamon technique, my father fought Dio again in a small English town called Winnight's Lot. Dio could rob a body of all heat in an instant, and my father seemed close to losing but managed to turn the tables and emerge victorious. But he failed to confirm the kill, according to Lisa's evaluation, and let the vampire fall into the valley. Or rather, just his head. Dio's body had been destroyed by my father's Hamon, but my estranged uncle managed to cut off his own head before the Hamon reached it, and so his brain survived. He lay low for 2 months without a body, surviving with the help of his zombies. Then he snuck aboard the ship my parents were taking the honeymoon on, and fought my father for a third time. As Mum reached the engine room they were fighting in, Some sort of bodily fluid light beam shot out of Dio's eyes and pierced my father's hands and throat. On the brink of death, my father used his last breath to send Hamon rippling through a zombie that attacked, manipulating the zombie into destroying the ship and the zombies on it. Mum wanted to die with him, but he convinced her to save a baby whom she found crying near her mother's corpse. That baby was Lisa. The two of them climbed into a special protective box Dio had constructed that saved them from the ensuing blast in the engine room. 2 days later, she was found floating in that box by some fishermen of the Canary Islands. When this long, insane story ended, Ch.3 said, "Ever since Dio opened the long-lost door to the land of the dead, complex echoes of fate and causality have led to dark powers rearing their heads in many lands. We have been unable to stop the fallout from these completely. On this island, it seems another zombie or vampire has appeared, even though we thought we killed them all 5 years ago." I remembered the sunlight turning Mr. Hernandez to dust and the Hamon that Lisa had used to destroy Alejandro Torres. I couldn't stop shaking. "This is an island," Lisa said. "Vampires and zombies can't come here by land. There are larger islands, more populated islands, but this is the second incident on La Palma. We're starting to wonder if there's a stone mask on this island." Lisa looked right at Mum. "Mama Irina, we have a question for you. We've spoken to the fishermen that rescued the two of us. They said they found us 100 kilometers southeast of La Palma, floating in a big black box that looked like a coffin. It only struck me then that Antonio Torres had called me Balsa Blanca because I'd been saved in a white raft. Was it actually a black coffin?" Lisa glanced at me quickly, then continued. "It was big enough to fit a fully grown man. There were cushions on the inside, and it was designed to shield the occupants from external blows. It sounds a little excessive for a coffin, but that's what the fishermen all called it. Was it a coffin, Mama Irina?" I looked at Mum, and she seemed to be gritting her teeth against some pain. She stared grimly back at Lisa, but didn't answer. "The fishermen also said that when you stepped out of your coffin raft, you had a baby, that's me, and something else, in a bundle made from fabric torn off the hem of your dress. They said you clutched it closely to you, and that it was about the size of a human head." "The size of a head?" Then Lisa thought it was a head. "You didn't bring Dio Brando's head to the Canary Islands, did you, Mama Irina?" Lisa asked. "You wouldn't have left George's father's body on the sinking ship and brought a vampire's head with you, shielding it from the sunlight, right?" There was a harsh gleam in her eye. This was what she'd meant by thorough. They were not even planning on showing mercy to family. But that question crossed the line. "Mum would never leave Dad behind." Lisa, you're being ridiculous," I said. But Lisa never took her eyes off Mum. Why wasn't Mum saying anything? She could silence Lisa with a word. My desire to defend her was slowly giving way to anxiety. At last, she broke her silence. "That was not Dio Brando's head." "Thank goodness! Of course it wouldn't be, stupid Lisa. I was about to yell at her when Mum spoke again. "That was the head of my husband, Jonathan Joestar. For the first time in my life, I was scared of my mum.